All right. Hello, I'm Carla Arovic. I'm a slow wine guide contributor for Oregon, and I'm talking with Dion Vineyard today. And I'm very excited to have them here. So thank you for being here, Kevin and Beth, Kevin Johnson and Beth Klinger.
Klinger, yeah.
Cool.
If you Google Beth Klinger and wine, you only get Dion Vineyard. If you Google Beth Johnson, you get a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, cool.
So I never changed my name.
That was smart. All right. So I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you, but I'd like to start off and find out, over the last 3 months or so, where the world has been so different, kind of how you're dealing with all of that.
There's a lot of drinking.
Drinking good wine, right, yes.
We've been drinking the cellar. We've had some really fun stuff. I was a pretty good wine collector before I met Kevin, and so we opened a Magnum of 2005 Patricia Green Estate. It was lovely, still
Nice.
Fresh and delicious. We had a 2007 Domaine Drouhin Magnum. We drank some of our Costa Brown that is California.
I know Costa Brown.
Yeah.
Cool.
We used to like it more than we do now, that's for sure. What else did we drink? We had some Barolos and some Barbarescos that were fun, and
lots of bubbles.
Lots of bubbles.
Oh, well, good. I would expect that from you too. That's awesome. Yay. Cool. Any profound organization changes within how you do business?
In the last 3 months, no.
Well, I mean, we've had, of course, the tasting room shut down until just this last, I guess, month, right? Is kind of when we didn't.
June 5th, we reopened.
Right, and so we had to, figure out how to do that. But organizationally, we were able to keep our tasting room people employed, and we're happy we were able to do that.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, we're pretty small, but we tried very hard to communicate with our wine club and our mailing list, and let them know that we're available for curbside pickup and things. And they actually, I think, supported us really nicely. And so we had a lot of curbside people come in picking up wine, so we were able to keep people busy.
We bottled our 2019 bubbles, and normally we would find somebody who was interested in it and have them help us, but instead, since our tasting room people are already fairly close to us, they're our chosen family, and we've got a small amount of exposure anyway. So, but we bottle pretty much outside on the crush pad, and with 4 people, it's pretty easy to stay apart. So it just takes all day, or a day and a half, actually.
Right. So we had them help us with that, though, where it's something they wouldn't have done normally, and so that worked pretty well. And
we did get a PP loan eventually.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. No, it took a while. Our banking institution wasn't one of those that was able to partake right away. You can figure out who that is if you do a little research. But they were able to get the second round going fine. It was a very modest loan. We weren't some of the bigger. Yeah, we were very big compared to a lot of it, but that was nice. So that's a bit of extra cash that'll help keep everybody employed and keep us going for a little bit. So.
Cool. Good. I'm glad that worked for you. Awesome. Have the roles of you two changed at all within the last year? Roles, responsibilities?
We have, so a year ago, Kevin's father passed away in May.
Oh.
So his mother and father did a lot of the business side and the book side of the business. And so we've had a rough year. Just in general, without COVID, we had a rough year.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
so she's now very safely in assisted living and seems to be fairly happy there. But then we had to put get her house all cleaned out and put it on the market and get it sold, which I think happens this week. And we'll finalize next week. And then just moving all the books into QuickBooks and us taking over the billing and changing the addresses. And it's a bigger job than you think it is. And then you have this virus distracting everything. You can't go anywhere because you don't want to go anywhere because everything is scary. And so
it's
that's a big deal.
Yeah, no, it was interesting thing for me. I actually have a background in finance. In fact, I have a bit of day job, or quite a bit of a day job in that area. But I ended up taking over quite a bit of the small business finance side that my dad did, and that's been a bit of an eye opener. You don't realize everything he's doing until he's not there to do it. So it's been a learning experience. But so far, the duck is sailing just fine on the top of the water, or underneath the feet are paddling away, right? So.
He was Joanne, Kevin's parents were majority shareholders in the LLC, and we redid that with some of the inheritance. So Kevin is now 50% owner of the vineyard business. And his mom donations.
And while that's not necessarily
nothing's
the
really
exciting
changed.
wine part vineyard part that everybody talks about, these are actual businesses, and if you don't keep them running,
you can't be making wine.
Not at all. So that's been a pretty big challenge, but I think we're getting there. And we missed Dad, of course. In fact, like we mentioned, the background behind us, we're actually down at the coast. We visited his grave today and placed some flowers and those kind of things. So it's been just a little bit over a year. And big shock for us, but we're doing our best.
So we're a really small organization, and Kevin and I are used to being in charge of the tasting room and the winery and the winemaking and storage and supervising some storage stuff. And now we've taken on the business side of it as well. Which is for me more of a learning than Kevin, because I don't have a finance background. Like, how do we do this? Learning QuickBooks.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the other big shift that we had done a year and a half, 2 years ago was changing our vineyard management company. To a more professional organization. Dion Vineyard's kind of, is it fair to say, run by the seat of their pants for a while? 20, 30 years.
Let's just say there's certain places and ways you do business at a certain scale that we've gotten on the vineyard side bigger than we used to be. And so certain things were more challenging than they should have been.
So we got a professional vineyard management company and who has a chief viticulturist who is UC Davis educated and is excellent and walks the vineyard with us and tells us exactly what she thinks is going on and what we need to do if we want to find out more information in terms of whether there's a virus or mites or soil. And the biggest change that we can see is that they have started doing cover crop and cross every other row cultivation. So the cover crop is a mix of oats and native grasses.
So, oats, native grasses. We had mostly just done native grass in terms of sort of in-row cultivation before. This is a little bit working on improving our soil health and also the biodiversity a little bit. And then working on the overall health of the vineyard as well. Our vineyard is actually, the vines at least, are getting pretty up there, pretty old. Our first plantings are 1976. We've got a bulk of plantings from the 80s. All of those are self-rooted. And I'll knock on wood here for a second. So far, that little creature hasn't visited us so that we can tell. But we do have some vine health issues as they get older. There's some trunk disease issues. And then, our youngest vines are still now 20 years old. And so it's nice to have someone who's got a nice professional background. They manage a lot of different vineyards to back us up. I learned a lot from my dad. I learned a lot by reading a lot and studying a lot. very much the gentleman farmer.
Trust me, I cleaned out like 4 to 6 file drawers full of handwritten notes on plant soil health and rootstock and different clones and growing conditions. And he was a meticulous note keeper and
Right.
he would deep dive into all kinds of things. It was fascinating.
He never caught on to the fact that, like, if you're the internet, you can go find things. So he would, find a book and buy it, and then it would be on the shelf, and then he would take notes, and they'd be in the file folder forever, kind of thing. So it's interesting for that. So
apparently, if you buy 26 books on golf, it improves your game.
Cool. I don't think it'd improve mine.
Yeah, he was a decent golfer, loved it a lot, but yeah, he had a lot of golf books. Yeah,
a lot of golf. I think there were three boxes full of golf books.
Oh,
they're now
so
at Goodwill.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, the vineyard has started really healthy and growing, and I've seen more bees and different kinds of bees this year than I've ever seen, which is pretty cool. We're talking about getting, what are the bee boxes that Sarah wants to get? These, they're a special kind of bee that live in a box. They're solitary. They're not hives. We don't have bandwidth to take care of bee hives just at this point.
I don't remember.
I'll text her and ask.
Yeah.
And I want bluebird boxes, but I missed the window this year, so maybe next year.
Cool.
But just overall, the vineyard's starting to look a lot. It always looked good, but now it's just looking more lush and healthy, and especially with the rain we've had recently, it's really easy to say. But ask me again in August when it's dry.
Yeah, dry and hot and dusty. Nice. Sounds like that was a good change for you.
Yeah, no, we're happy with it. I know, one of the things you guys are interested is sort of is sustainability, as are we, and first of all, the vineyard management practice that we're now taking we're already doing live beforehand, and so we're already a long ways towards that. But we're working not just on the soil health. We already dry farm. And so Bethel even get more into this. Bethel, New Mexico. So for her, water's kind of a religion. But and so we already dry farm, and so we feel like we're good there. We're working on the soil health. We've stepped away from Roundup. I know a lot of people are not very excited about that, and use for just conventional methods for under row
mowing.
Weed mowing. Yeah, weed prevention. We also have been really happy with some of the labor practices as well that have been undertaking. The company we're using is committed to paying a more than, I think, a living wage would be understating, a good wage with health insurance, proper safety practices, which is doubly critical now, at least in this very time. And we see that all the time with the crews out there. They're smart, they're professional, they do things well, they have the right equipment, they have the right signs posted that are current. And it's not 5 years old. It's been really good. I wouldn't want to say that we were taking bad practices, but these guys are on top of it. There you go. We like to see that. And by them managing more than one vineyard, they're able to maintain a crew that is of good size, can be professional, and can, like I said, earn a proper wage and be well taken care of. It's also employee owned, I think, and so and so we just like that a lot. And I think that's, again, one of the parts about sustainable should also mean economically sustainable. And just like we're figuring out how QuickBooks work and make sure the business is working right, we want to make sure that the people that work for us, either directly or indirectly, are taken care of, and feel we've done a good step in that direction too. So.
Excellent.
Plus, they have access to lots of equipment, and we don't have to buy it. We can just rent it for when we need it, which is all. So with the under row mowing, we didn't have a good under row mower that wouldn't damage the vines, and now they can just charge us for a couple days of using it, and that works better for us instead of investing a bunch of money in a mower to be obsolete in 10 years or whatever, or require maintenance that they're using it all the time, and so they can just bring it here and use it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great deal. Let's transition to talking about winemaking and your winemaking style. Has it changed at all in the last year in terms of the wines that you're making or the way that you're making them?
We don't call ourselves natural winemakers because I'm not sure exactly. Unstable connection. We'll try to keep going. But I think if anything, we've gotten more minimalist. We actually had we did not make a wind sauce. We weren't happy how it was turning, and rather than employ more interventionist winemaking methods, we just decided to not make it. And I think if anything, we're just seeing that we're very happy with that decision. We're not very good at making it to people when we're talking about our wines, and so we didn't want to have the wine that we had to explain. And it wasn't anything that would have been. We're not talking about anything that's unsafe or anything, those kind of things. It's just something that the wine was not going the way we wanted it to, and to manipulate it that much, we just didn't want to make it. So we didn't. And I think that's just for us continuing on a way we already were at, and we continue to do so. It's going to be interesting because part of our winemaking style is that we should be true to the vineyard and true to the vintage. And 19 is going to be a different vintage than a lot of people have seen for a while. It was cooler, not cold, and it rained a bit at harvest, not anything like 13 or those kind of disasters, but it presented a different ripening profile than I think a lot of people who, if you started making wine after 2013, you haven't seen this, and certainly, 2011, of course, is cold, but not kind of the same. So it was just, it was interesting to see. I think we're pretty excited with it. We're actually, I think, drinking some 2019 Pinot Gris right now.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And we're really happy with how that came out already. And then the Pinots are, I think, going to be nice and very pretty, but different than your bigger Pinots that we've seen, 14, 15, 17, those kind of Pinots. So.
And 2019 seems to be a fairly reductive vintage, which we are not used to because we're on such a small scale, and you've been in our facility. We don't have a lot of tools or room to do things, so we tend to get more oxygen than we want usually. But reductive is not really in our toolkit because we haven't dealt with it before, and we did in 19. That was what went south in the rosé, and it went too far south. The Pinot Gris is nicely in balance, and then we really saw this in the sparkling. We bottled it in early May 5th, because Cinco de Mayo seems to be our tradition for some reason.
Yep.
And, so we do a wedding tree cuvée that I think you had last year. That is a blend.
I like that. Yeah, that's
Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and it finished fermenting, and I had it sent down to be tested, and it's completely dry. So we hand riddled a little bit and tested it and tasted it, and it's a little bit of reduction in sparkling wine is fantastic because it gets so much oxidation in the whole process when you do it method traditional. So I think it's going to turn out. I'm really excited about it, but now I have to wait for 2 years.
I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, we have the 2017 wedding tree is.
We're playing
blooming.
with the idea of August.
Right. Yeah, we haven't discouraged yet. The question is, how soon do we want to? It shaped up nicely in the last 6 months, and so we think. We could probably start any time, but the longer we wait, in theory, the nicer it'll get. So we'll see. But it's always fun. We, of course, like sparkling wine a lot and to consume, and making it's turned out to be a lot of fun. It's really, you got to think quite long term on your winemaking, and it's very interesting to taste a base wine and be like, okay, where do we think this is going to go? Admittedly, we have a fairly small experience base compared to the Champenois or those kind of people, but there's only one way to get more experience, and we're working on it. So,
practice.
Yeah. So
So we finished the 15. We ended up buying some grapes for 16, which is why it's not in this tasting, because it's not a state fruit. Because we bought the wine. It was in Crown Cap, and we just gorged it. So went through that experience with Andrew down in McMinnville, and then and we love that wine, but it's not our estate fruit, so it doesn't make sense for this kind of a tasting. And then the 17, when we tasted it I think the reason we bought the 16 is we tasted it and we're like, this isn't ready, and we're almost out of 15, and what are we going to do? Because it doesn't taste like it's ready to be disgorged. And so we put it back away, and we're complaining about not having any 16-based wine. And a winemaker friend of ours said, hey, I made too much. Want to taste it? We're like,
right. Happens to be from, we'll call it a cousin. It's also the new Laurelwood and blowing Laurelwood soils. And so it is directionally similar, like I said, cousin, if you will. And we, of course, finished it with our base wines, so from our vineyard into our styles and those. And so it's different than the 15 or 17 sparklings that we've done, but it's a fun addition to what we've been doing, and a good learning experience.
And it let us wait for the 17 to be ready. And, I'd like to say that we make wine on a schedule and release it on a schedule, but we don't, because we're small scale enough that we don't have that huge demand or expectations set for us by our customers. So we can say, it's not ready, so we're not releasing it. Or, yeah, we didn't do a rosé this year because it wasn't what we wanted to make or the way we wanted to make it. And most people understand that. They're like, oh, but I love your rosé. I'm like, not this one. So, but the sparkling, it's really nice to have the time to wait for the wine to be ready and do it. I think when we first started making wine, we used to do it on our schedule, not on the wine schedule. And luckily we ended up at very small levels of that, but you learn a lot. When you try to make wine on your schedule, not the wine schedule, then you make different decisions. And now we're like, well, the wine's not ready, let's not do it yet. Let's figure out what we can do and what the timing right is.
Nice.
100% with that, because we don't do our own bottling, so we have to work with other people's schedules all the time, but that kind of stuff.
Okay. So the last question about wine before I have you take me through the 3 selections are, what qualities do you want your wine to have? Are they made to be an early drinking or something that you hold on to, or, vary from year to year based on the vintage and the vineyard, and, kind of, would you describe them a certain way?
Well, our single our goal is to make the best wine that we can from our vineyard, in the year that it's made. So what we did in 2010 is very different than what we did in 2014, because they're weather-wise, it's maybe
pretty close.
And there was a conversation I had with a client of ours, because we sell most of our grapes, who was saying, oh, you've become a pretty good winemaker. And I said, I don't think that I actually am a very good winemaker. I think I'm a very good winemaker for Dion Vineyard, because I know this fruit, and I've only done it for 9 years. Kevin has known this fruit for 45 years. And so
which is weird, because I'm only 33, but so.
But when you work with the same fruit from the same blocks year after year after year, you start to get some expectations of what you can expect it to do and what you think it will do. And like now, when we did our second round of barrel tastings of the 19s, and we know the Pomard is not where we want it to be, but we also know that in 3 months it probably will be, because we've done this 9 years, 10 years now together. And if we wait, and whereas what's a rock star now is not necessarily going to be a rock star in 3 months. And so we really have learned some patience and let each block come into its own. And then sometimes we surprise ourselves, but we still taste blind. It's very scientific. You put a piece of tape on the bottom of the glass, and but we taste blind. And the only thing, I can always pick out a new barrel, but I can't always get the clone right. And it's all Pinot. But I don't always get the clone right. What I think it is not what it is, because I taste it every day when it's fermenting, because I'm usually the one who's at the winery every single day doing punch downs. we taste the juice, and so I watch it go through that. But then we only barrel taste every couple of months.
Right. It's an important thing you learn on barrel tasting.
And it's a lot longer.
Barrel tasting too early, like when the wine is, well, not certainly if it hasn't finished ML, or if it's just recently you do it. I like to call it about, it's like going into a teenager's room. Sometimes you just don't want to do it. You're going to learn things you didn't want to know. And so it's better to leave it alone, have its private, let it mature. And then you start barrel tasting, you don't freak out. I think overall philosophy, white wines will be tasting one of those. We tend to go for, I think a fairly fresh flavor style there that we tend to release fairly. And we tend to try to shoot for, in all the wines, we're looking for that block of the vineyard, or that part of the vineyard, that varietal in the vineyard, to the best that it could do for that vintage. So we're not necessarily wedded to any particular style like bone dry or sweet or this much new oak or this much aging time. We're trying to get it to do the best it could do from that vintage. White wines, we tend to go, though, I think a little bit fresher, quicker release. We're mostly doing Gris and some Viognier in those, and those tend to be better, I think, sooner, earlier. Generally for summer, when we do rosé, it tends to the same thing, we want to be lighter on its feet. We don't usually use oak for white wines. We've made Chardonnay from time to time with a bit of oak and try to make it very neutral, blend in some stainless steel if we have to. We want the grapes to show through, the vineyard to show through. So we don't want it to be too strong of a signal from other winemaking aspects. So on the Pinot side, we tend to do at most 50% new oak, and that's only with the reserve and single blocks that we know can handle it. So we tend to even do less new oak than that.
I find when we taste wines that have 100% new oak, I'm like, oh, this has Syrah in it.
Yeah.
And somebody pointed out to me, I think you're tasting new oak. And I'm like, oh, no, that's exactly what I'm tasting. It may or may not have Syrah in it, but new oak to me does not express, it overwhelms Pinot.
Right.
That's my opinion. And on the Lorewood soils, it almost definitely does.
Right. The oak itself is French, medium toast, no charred heads or anything like that. So try, again, a mild tool used in the right amount, not too much. Sparkling wines, although we're still in the beginning of that, I think we are not. We're looking to get the right amount of dosage and the right dosage vehicle to make it. We love grower champagne, so we tend to aim towards emulating that. And grower champagne, of course, is a rather large spectrum, but it fits with our overall being about a vineyard philosophy. We don't necessarily do no dosage. We usually do dosage. We usually prefer it.
But our secondary ferments have always gone dry so far.
We don't want it to be sweet. We're just learning some interesting things about, there's some levers to pull on ripeness for sparkling wine that I think are interesting. That I think there's a lot of sparkling wine starting up in the Willamette Valley, and it's fun. Everybody's excited. Got some seminars and tastings, and I think there's some levers there that we can work on. You could pick some that's at a very front end of the ripeness to give it some brightness and acidity, but you can pick some stuff later in the ripeness. Keep in mind that's going to be like 4 days later. So you're going to have to be on it on your picking schedule. That give you a little more richness to it, while still being clearly, definitively in the sparkling ripeness level. And you can also do a lot of interesting things with sparkling wine and blending. We've tended to do some mostly Pinot so far. The Wedding Tree Cuvée 15 was 90+% Pinot Noir, but with a little bit of Chardonnay. It's really interesting to see how a little bit of Chardonnay can move that wine. It's very interesting. Same thing, the dosage vehicle can move things around. It's a lot of fun. So I think that all fits together into the philosophy of let's try to make the best wine the vineyard could make for that vintage. And it's fun to try it in all the different forms.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And we don't have wine from any other vineyards anyway.
Yeah, no, one of these days, I don't know, maybe we do that. That'd be weird.
Okay. Well, why don't you take me through the wine? And thank you for sending that to me. And the reason I'm not going to taste through with you today is just because I want to be able to focus on our conversation rather than be distracted. And
I hope so.
What's that?
We've been to
But I
already.
want you to taste. So what I'd love for you to do, start with the Pinot Gris and tell me about it. You know, what you're most excited about, the flavor profile.
So,
It's 100% stainless steel.
right. Like I was saying, with Pinot Gris, we get very, very nice aromatics on our Pinot Gris from our vineyard. And so most of what we're doing winemaking wise with Pinot Gris is to not get in the way of that. So we don't use stainless steel. We work pretty hard on keeping the temperature cool, 60 degrees or less while it's going through fermentation. That helps keep a hold of all those really nice flavors that you can blow off if you get too warm. We pick at a fairly modest ripeness level, generally 21 bricks or so. Once upon a time, I may have accidentally got a 24 bricks Pinot Gris started that when last seen before it disappeared into the bulk wine market.
2009.
Yeah, 2009. It was tasted like a lemon drop cocktail.
But not in a good way.
It was still fermenting, and it was like one year. And so I learned importantly from that Pinot Gris can actually get too ripe if you're not careful. So you want to be, and this actually helps us a lot talking to our vineyard customers, you know, in terms of Pinot Gris, being like, hey, you want to get this off sooner or later, and they're usually almost always in agreement with that. This has a little bit of residual sugar. What we are looking for on Pinot Gris is getting residual sugar right at just at the perception of the threshold of perception, so that for some people it's a little sweet, for some people it's not quite there. That really lifts and brightens the fruit flavors very nicely. It also can smooth out, I call potholes. I tend to have some weird winemaking terms. Pinot Gris is really easy for it to pick up just a little bit of tannin structure because of the skins are pretty close to Pinot Noir. And they can, with that thin skinness, even modest ripeness levels we pick at can be.
The dog
our dog is right
dreaming.
over here and he's asleep and running. But that little bit of tannin can give you just these little flavor potholes, and a little bit of sugar just kind of cleans those up really nicely. And so it's nice, refreshing, just in time for summer, assuming I guess we finally had some hot weather. And we bottle it. It goes stainless steel ferment. It doesn't go through a secondary ferment. We bottle it fairly quickly so that it's available to be released. And again, like we're talking about, fairly fresh, we've tasted, you know, Pinot Gris that's a couple of years old and it's perfectly fine. But we think it aims best for, you know, that summer right after it got picked is when it's probably at its best.
Cleaning out the basement in his parents' house, we found a bunch of 2010, and it's still good. But it was a very cold, acidic year, which it helps preserve it. I think the most important thing we learned about Pinot Gris is keeping it cool when it's fermenting. We got some jacketed tanks in 2015,
right, small scale,
yeah. I think, and our Pinot Gris just started getting consistently good, and we were much happier with it. And we take the same block every year and pretty close to the same ripeness, but keeping it cool and slow fermentation wise, and it can go for 3-4 months sometimes. Right. It'll go really slowly at 60 degrees, but then you just get the best clean, fresh, delicious Pinot Gris, and on a hot day it's perfect.
Yeah, and so another nice thing, this block that we take this from was planted in 1990, I think it was 89 maybe. So these are some pretty old vines, which is nice. It's not normally something you talk about too much for Pinot Gris, but
yeah,
even though we don't necessarily look to develop the phenolic structure, the complexity that you see in red wines, I think they do something nice with a little bit older vines, and so I'm really happy how it came out, and it's you know, priced modestly and available so that you can enjoy it, you know, throughout the summer kind of thing.
We don't have I didn't send you tech notes on it. I think I sent you tasting notes on the Pinot Gris. We wrote tasting notes. We didn't do the sheets on it.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to look. I don't recall seeing them, but it doesn't mean you didn't send them.
Well, there was paper in the box. But I have electronic
Oh.
copies for the Pinot Noirs. I know I have text sheets. Let me send those to you, email.
Okay, I
do that.
didn't pull the those little holders all the way out to see if there was anything on the very, very bottom.
And I may have taped it backwards anyway. Sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, just going before the heat goes.
No, I'm so glad you got it off to me before we had our heat wave.
Yeah, our 2-day heat wave.
Well, Oregon summers classically start after the 4th of July, right? So I would say right now, keeping track, I haven't updated the heat units for the last few days, but we were right about on 30 long-term, 30-year average. Maybe you've got snuck a little bit ahead. We're aiming for harvest will be last week of September probably. So right now, and we just went through bloom. Now the only thing about that's going to be interesting, and I haven't heard anybody else talk much about this yet, but you may have noticed we had quite a bit of rain in the last 2 weeks. That is classically not good weather for crop set. And we at least, and I think most of the valley, in some portion, may have ended up with a smaller crop because that rain interfered with the pollination and the setting of the crop. I won't know for another few weeks at the earliest because the berries have just formed for the most part in the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay. We have a few other varietals that take a little bit later path. And so over the next month or so, I'll be tracking the cluster weights and the berry sizes, and I'll be able to get an idea whether or not, but it's possible that we end up with small crop this year because of all that rain. Which
Interesting.
Again, we'll see. Every vintage is different. So, and that's one of the things we've been, we like to play with and be true to. So
There's a lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
there's also a lot of walking.
All right.
You want to move on?
If you're ready to.
Yeah. So if you have any more, I don't know, questions on the Pinot Gris, hopefully.
I don't. I'm looking forward to writing the tasting notes for that.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it when you get to it. It's just really pleasant, really refreshing, really nice. Give myself in trouble here a little bit. Chardonnay attention in Oregon these last maybe more than a few years at this rate.
We've moved all of ours into our sparkling production. The stuff that we take for ourselves.
Chardonnay's lovely, and it's good that it gets attention. It's certainly one of the classic grapes. I think Pinot Gris is getting a little, missing a little attention that it should be getting. It's still, I think, the second most planted varietal in Oregon. It makes a lovely wine. If we wanted to make wine, a Pinot Gris that is the Alsatians and the Germans, go for a later style, more higher complexity, higher sugar level wines. Really nice respect in that style. I think we could do that in Oregon if we want. It's not really the palate for most consumers here. So we aim for something different. But it's just a really nice varietal, and every wine needs to be $60 a bottle, even for people who can't afford that. So it's nice. It's nice to make a wine that I think people can enjoy without even having to worry about it too much.
Mm-hmm. And what are the aromatics on that?
I think we get a lot of pear on this one, as I recall.
I get citrus. It's lemons and limes.
Yeah.
It has a nice grassy smell to it, and it's like that freshly mown grass or grass. Right. To me, it smells like cover crop right after rain, which I'm totally projecting. I've seen the cover crops change this over the past 2 years. But I just like fresh green.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It tastes. The teeth have some definite grapefruit. I'm just thinking, look at the sparkling. Had a lot of. The more classic Pinot Gris characteristics are probably counterbalancing it a little bit, and I'm not sure that the ripeness level. So it's nice, it's pleasant, very nice actually.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the Pinot. Did you want to try the? Describe the 115 West next, or the Old Vine?
2014. And unfortunately, I didn't have any to bring with us, and got checked up on our trip and didn't go grab a bottle from Winery. But I know this wine, drunk it quite a bit, and we've been drinking the cellar. So I'm like, oh, let's drink one of everything we've got. So we know what about with people, because people are like, how's this tasting? I'm like, I haven't tasted it in months to drink some. We have had it recently. I just don't have it today. So 14 was, I love Pinot Noir. I could drink Pinot Noir for the rest of my life and be happy. 14 was a huge year. It was really large crop and really warm until we got to 15, which was warmer. And it was, the 115 is our little rock star in the vineyard. It's on RG rootstock, which ripens super early and is infamous for ripening super early. And then these guys were planted in 2000. And so the 115 is always our favorite barrels up front. When I was talking about barrel tasting, the Pommard will take longer to develop, and we always tasting. But we always get them. They're rock stars, and they ferment easily. They're happy. 14, we did a lot. It was the first time we really started experimenting with native ferments and just letting them go. We make wine in a very small space in the middle of a vineyard. So there's all kinds of stuff that's out of our control. So we have done yeast additions in the past, and then 14, we're like, well, let's see what happens. It's fermenting, let's let it go. And it did. The 115 did, and the Pommard did, both that year. And they were delicious. And so we're like, great, let's keep going with this. Now, does yeast live in a winery? Yes, who knows? But it spontaneously fermented, and we let it go.
Native.
So we had two fermenters worth, and we got about 9 to 10 barrels, because it was a lot of fruit. It was huge. And then we had a lot of thing. And when we were still hand bottling at that time, and we run it through a cross flow, very light cross flow to just clean things up. And we had so much wine in 14 that we couldn't get it all through. And we back up a little bit. We were tasting the barrels, and we liked the 115 enough that we're like, this can stand by itself as a wine, instead of putting it into the reserve and the Chehalem Mountains, which blends of different clones. So we pulled 2 barrels, and I think we pulled 4 and played with the blends, 1 new, 1 neutral, until we got 50 cases.
Right. Small amount, awesome. I think
we ran a time on the cross flow, so it's completely unfiltered. And 14, in technical terms, a junky vintage. It was there's a lot of stuff in the wine, like 11 junky. We got to 12, and it didn't matter. It was super clean, right? Sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't. I don't think anybody fully understands. There's a lot of theories on why that happens in different years. 15 was super clean. 14 was not. So we just were like, we don't have time to do this, so we'll just bottle it. And we bottled the 50 cases. And so you get, don't drink that last glass. I'm sorry. I call it wine sludge. So the last glass, you want to leave it upright for a while before you drink it. And the last glass, you may not want to drink that last half a glass, because it's going to have some cement and be a little chewy. But that said, it's also pure exhibition of the fruit of 2014, which was amazing. It was such an amazing vintage. Big and juicy and delicious. Also, it's like as ripe and delicious as Oregon gets, with all the oomph that has it behind it. So our vineyard tends to exhibit a lot of cherries and pomegranates and red cherry fruits and that kind of stuff. And this is a little deeper, I think, probably just because of the heat. And the ripeness levels were good. So we really like this wine, especially over time. When we first released it, we had problems because we had to explain that it had sediment, and we don't like explaining our wines.
We don't want, we like our wines to explain themselves. How about that? Like, the more that, as much fun as it is to talk about our wines, and obviously like doing it, the best way sometimes is you pour the wine, let someone enjoy it without saying a thing. And So, you know, if you pour that wine in, there's a little bit of sediment, you're like, oh, I got to explain to you why that sediment's in there. And even if it's not a problem, and even if that wine drinker doesn't, you know, a lot of wine drinkers don't care. They drink a lot of wine, especially if it comes from the bigger, more Bordeaux styles. You know, sediment is a very common thing. There's a reason decanters exist. But we're always like, oh, wait, we got to explain. And so it's always, that's maybe our problem. We just, we want to make sure the wine just goes out in the world on its own and everybody loves it, kind of thing. So
we have a tasting room that's open to the public. So we get all kinds of people, but most wine tasters are self-selecting, looking for a good experience. And our ideal customer who keeps coming back and ends up joining the wine club and becomes usually are the people who taste what's in their glass. They're not looking around going, ooh, look at this fancy countertop, and oh, look at all these awards, and oh, I really like the label. They're tasting what's in their glass, and truly, and you know, it's not usually their fourth stop of the day, which we've all made that mistake, right? So the person who really, and then when they take a bottle home and they're sitting on their couch on a Wednesday night and they crack it up and they're like, oh man, this is really good. That's the person we're going for, is the person who's going to taste what's in the glass. And yes, remember the view out of the tasting room and the vineyard and the lush beautifulness of the tree that's there and parking lot, but you know, the vines and and the nice people they met, but still taste what's in your glass. And so this, to me, the Wine West, particularly in 14, really exhibits that characteristic.
Yeah. And you know, the 115, I would say, is a lot of red fruit, a lot of what, you know, this is Dijon clone, and we have a variety of them, but the one we're going to taste next is not Dijon clones, and they show very differently in the glass, and so it's fun to bottom separately, and we also will bring them together in blends as well. And I think the other thing too is we mentioned that the Laurelwood District AVA that we just got approved. I don't think we talked about that very much. We spent a lot of time working on that AVA. One of the things, the principal thing that it's about is Laurelwood soils. And Laurelwood soils are really interesting, is they give you a really nice red fruit note that's similar to it. You get a red fruit note. We think it's something you might get out of like Dundee, out of Jory soils, but I like to call it an octave higher. Same note, just a little bit higher tone. And then you also get a lot of spiciness, tend to be white spice, sometimes pepper, that kind of stuff. I find for me that the 115 tends to be a little more red than darker. I think, I don't know if you get the same. One thing you learn, it's very interesting, even though you're married, your palates are different. So yeah, the nice part is we've done pretty well, I think, at understanding what each of us is talking about, which helps. It's nice to be able to make wine, blend wines, put wines together with someone else consistently, I think. Most winemakers I don't think they get that. So.
We always get along during barrel tasting. That's right. Not a problem. First thing in the morning, forklifting, not so much.
Okay.
Anyway, we don't make this every year. We made it in 2011. We made it in 14 and 15, and they're very different, 14 and 15. And we're only going to do 50 cases. And then we made it again in 18. Right. Only, again, 50 cases, which we haven't tasted it since it's been bottled. We need to get some of that wine and taste it. But we always, it's really when we make it in the years when the 115 barrels stand out as exceptional in and of themselves.
Right.
And then segueing into the old vines.
Speaking of blocks that
easily stand out all by themselves. So, sorry. This is from the original vines planted in 1976. 17 means that they were 41 years old. Right. So probably like the 37th year they got fruit, 38th year they got fruit, or that was put into wine. We take the same 12 rows of it. There's how many rows of old vines planted?
We have
24, 36?
There are 27 rows of Pinot Noir that are planted in 1976. We take, I guess, not quite half.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
12 or 8?
We take 12 rows. I helped plant them. It wasn't very big. And we hand planted those as pretty much family hand planted vines. They are self-rutted, and like we're saying, so far, again, knock on wood, haven't had that little fun guy show up yet. The first 12 rows of this particular area, not the rows that go into this one, happen to support our sparkling program. It's a slightly different clone of Pinot Noir that sets really heavy fruit. And so the wedding tree cuvee that we were talking about earlier also comes from this, a little bit further west from this area. So.
But for the still wines, we take the crop down. We're aiming for 2.5 tons to acre.
So
we have really wide row spacing for one.
We have 9-foot spacing, which was classic 70s and 80s Oregon plantings, even a little bit in the 90s.
And really good for social distancing in the vineyard.
Right, yeah.
Stay in your own row.
Send people up and down their own row, and they're fine. No, so what we shoot for there on the vineyard side, we're going for one of our higher end Pinot Noirs. We're looking for more. Challenge with that is 1 acre is not the same as others. That literally that row spacing we're talking about means the vine density is different in an acre depending on how close the vines are planted together. Oregon State, Dr. Patty Skankus down in Oregon State has been doing a lot of work, research on what crop levels are due, but generally the way to talk about crop level rather than tons per acre, we talk more either clusters per shoot or sometimes pounds per foot, which end up being kind of the same thing. The idea being is that, well, if you ever have, next time you go out and look at grapes, vines, particularly in Oregon, we do what's called cane pruning. So you'll have shoots that come up from the cane. Right now they're up to the top as far as high as they're going to get. We'll hedge them off here and we'll to keep them from growing too far. And on each one of those shoots, you'll get generally 2 clusters for Pinot Noir, sometimes 3, sometimes only 1. And then if you want to get into the 401 level, you can talk about how many shoots and the spacing of the shoots and how many shoots are on the head of the vine and how many shoots are on the end of the vine. At any rate, the idea basically is that with 2 clusters, that shoot is going to have to divide its energy into ripening those 2 clusters. With only 1 cluster, it will be able to focus a little bit more and produce a little bit nicer ripeness on the cluster. It can make a big difference in a cold year on the overall basic ripeness levels. On a warm year, you may not see it so much in like the bricks, but we're fairly convinced you'll see it on the flavors and the structure and the complexity of it. And so when you have a wine in a block that you think can do something really special, it may be worth it to do that where you only get 1 cluster down. So that's what this wine does. And 2017 was quite a warm vintage. In fact, in many ways, it's what happened with 2017. It's kind of the opposite of 2016. 16, there's 2 factors on when you're picking grapes. Primary factor is going to be the time from bloom, what we just went through right now in this vintage. Classically, 100 days later is when you'll pick. The other part is about the amount of heat you get during the summer and how much that'll push the ripeness, the sugar ripeness of the fruit. Some vintages, cooler vintages, typically what happens is you'll get to 100 days first. You'll get to 100 days without necessarily as much heat. And so you have grapes that have that 100 days tends to drive the complexity, the color, the flavors, and the heat of the vintage drives the sugar and how big the wine will be. Cool vintage, you don't get as much heat, so you'll end up with more acidity, lower alcohol wines with complexity. And Burgundy, cool Burgundy vintages in particular are classic examples of that, where you'll have stuff come in that's got great color and it's at 20 bricks. 17 is the opposite of that. 17, we had a lot of heat show up, particularly in the summer. You'll remember that was the year with all the forest fires. I think it was the year the gorge burned up.
And the total solar eclipse.
And the solar eclipse, which made
Oh,
it
right, yeah.
for a little bit.
Where it dropped 10 degrees when the sun went away, and we all went, oh, thank God it's only 85.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what happened there is we ended up with quite a bit of heat, and we're like, okay, well, the grapes should be ready, but we hadn't really hit that 100-day mark. 16 was the exact opposite. We got that 100-day mark in August, the end of August, and the heat of summer had only partially arrived. So the front end of the 2016 vintage acted like a cool vintage. 2017, the other way around, we had plenty of heat, but not enough 100 days. And both us and the vineyard managers for the wineries that we work with were flummoxed because everybody thought that the grapes would go, and they went to a certain ripeness level and parked for about a week. And then when we got close to that 100 days, whoop, they came right up. And so what we end up with is wines that are as big as 2015 and 2014 because they had the heat, but they also develop there's a real depth and to these guys. They're just, I think they're big and warm and friendly. They're really nice. They're not, if you like really lean, austere Burgundian Pinot, that might not be your vintage for you, but this is
19 will be.
But the fun part is maybe make fun of California Pinot a little bit. It's still Oregon Pinot. It's still not overripe, jammy.
No residual sugar.
The wine is dry. It's got more, higher alcohol, of course, because of hot vintage. But it's just nice, warm, rich Oregon Pinot. And this particular block, because of its age, because of the crop levels, really gives really nice complexity, really depth. You know how to taste this. You know when we taste this in the barrel almost every time.
Yeah. So I think it smells like pickles, but that's not a good descriptor for wine.
Maybe salinity.
Salinity, and it's like if you're gonna make a Manhattan and you want a really high quality maraschino cherry, which is basically a pickled cherry, right? But you're really good pickled, fresh, home preserves, that kind of salinity and saltiness, not the commercial maraschino cherries. Does that make sense? I get that on the nose, and then lots of good fruit. It's got some plums, but it's still red plums. It's not the deep, dark brooding plums. And then it's not quite as high-toned red fruit because it's such a warm vintage, but
it hasn't shifted necessarily yet to like black fruit, dark fruit yet. And there's kind of maybe an earthiness in the background.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And there's still lots of acidity. Our vineyard shows a lot of acidity naturally, and we're just happy with that because I'm an acid queen, and that's what I like. We want to make wine that we want to drink, that we want to talk about, that we enjoy. And Chaco doesn't care for wine, but he's awake now.
Sorry, we're losing the light a little bit, so we're kind of in shadow, but this is Chaco. He's our 14-and-a-half-year-old dog.
Aww.
See the gray face there, yeah. So he had a big day, walk on the beach.
I was trying to cut back on the amount of glare.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you have anything else that you want to add for the record?
Yeah, just like I mentioned there in passing, we have new AVA approved this year. Laurelwood District AVA. It dropped on that one blackout Tuesday, which was
in the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic, so time for our marketing purposes. But that was an AVA that my dad started working on back before the Chehalis Mountain AVA actually was approved, and he worked on it with Louise Ponzi. I picked up the baton from him, continued to work with her. We did a lot of work on it all together. It was really nice and collaborative, and we put it in, I don't know, 3 years ago.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. Finally got approved. It's really exciting. It's based on the soil type. My dad thought that was really, really important. It didn't get approved while he was still here, but he knew it was in. He was really excited about it. And so we're happy to see it come along, and I think it'll actually help I think people will be able to tell whenever we get a chance to finally maybe do some organized tastings, whenever that is. Geez, I think it'll be fun to show just kind of what we see in the Laurelwood district. I think these wines that we had just showed today are great examples. Really nice, pretty white wines, red wines that have that nice, pretty red tones and spiciness to them. Sparkling wine will. Well, we know we've had a few of them already. We'll have to see how the rest of them. So anyway, that's been exciting news for us. Long time in the making, and so we'll be excited everybody out for when we can do those kind of things again.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking with me today. I'm excited that you'll be in the guide again this year.
Thank you for your patience. We appreciate it.
Oh, excellent. No worries.